Okay, so we're continuing to talk about the Sepoy Mutiny. The East India Company has introduced the Enfield rifle. The Sepoy troops, who are mostly either Muslims or Hindus, um, are upset because the cartridges for these guns um, could possibly be wrapped using animal fat to keep them together. Of course, putting animal fat in your mouth, if you're a Hindu, if it's cow fat, or if you're Muslim, if it's pig fat, can make you unclean. And so this is something um, that deeply offended these soldiers. Um, the British government attempts to mollify them by introducing cartridges that are greased with vegetable fat, but it doesn't really help. And by May of 1857, we have a mutiny on our hands. Of course, a mutiny is just whenever people, soldiers, decide that they're not going to follow orders. And there are a number of violent incidents that go along with this. But one of them I wanted you to make you aware of, and I gave you a video to watch on this, is the Kanpur massacre, also known as the Bibigar massacre, where about 120 people, including a large number of women and children, are slaughtered. It's a pretty gory event. The news of the mutiny reaches back to England or to Britain, and the British government decides that it's time to take over operations or control of India from the East India Company. And so 1858 is a big year. Um, and I guess I don't have the year 1858 on here, but be aware of that. So from roughly 1757 to 1858, India is administered by a private corporation, the East India Company, and after that time, through Indian independence after the end of the Second World War, um, India is governed directly from Britain. The British government appoints a new Secretary of State who is based in London. There is also a viceroy known as the Governor General, who has his headquarters at Delhi in India, in northern India. Um, the British government also creates a bureaucracy called the Indian Civil Service. It has a reputation of being extremely well administered. Uh, Most of the people that staff that agency are graduates of the elite universities in Britain. And the way the Indian Civil Service works is that you have a British administrator, a supervisor, who is put in charge of a number of Indian employees. And this is the way that British policy gets implemented throughout the country. The agents of the Indian Civil Service also act as judges, civil judges, um, primarily in a number of different legal actions. And things cool down a little bit. The British, after the Sepoy Mutiny, uh, they are a little bit more respectful of the way of the Indian traditions. Of course, during this time period, there's been a great movement among the British to eliminate some of the traditional Hindu practices, such as sati, which involves throwing a woman on the funeral pyre of her husband and having her burned to death. Um, and there are a number of other practices, babies being thrown into the Ganges River, things of this sort. And so a lot of these things were deeply offensive to Victorian British sentiment, and of course to modern liberal sentiment in general. But anyway, they had to figure out a way to accommodate. Here is a map showing the extent of Hindu and Muslim territories in India. Um, you see over to the right the little if in conflagration there. That is Plassey, the Battle of Plassey, the Bengal region. So, and I'm going to post this PowerPoint so you can take a closer look at it. And this map is also in your book. So, this is just a illustration of one of the many ceremonies that the British conducted to reinforce the imagery of their authority, trying to step in the shoes of the Mughal emperors, taking over from the Mughal emperor. And a lot of these traditions were not actually traditions, but they were made up traditions. This is a scene from an Indian railway station. One of the things the British do very well is bring infrastructure to India, and this is a huge advantage for India moving forward. By the time we get to the 20th century, India has one of the best developed rail networks in the world, and this is going to vastly assist their economy moving forward. Just while I'm thinking about it briefly, wanted to mention the concept of indentured labor. We've talked about that before in connection with settling North America. But during the second half of the 19th century, after slavery becomes illegal, a lot of the industry, the plantations and various extractive industries in South America, the Caribbean, and other places that had previously relied on slave labor are now forced to find another source of cheap labor. And many of the laborers that they are able to get come from India during this period. So, for example, you start to see a large Indian population in places like Trinidad, in South Africa. Of course, Gandhi, during the time of the First World War, has been living in South Africa and ends up organizing a troop of Indian volunteers to work as medics during that war. All right, so that is it for this video, and just remember that chapter 24 is also going to be on the test. I will try to do a brief video about that as well, but most of the test will be based on the earlier chapters. But you are responsible for chapter 24 as well.